and I'm chair of this meeting as the leader of the Vale Council and cabinet member for performance and resources. May I remind participants that the meeting is being live streamed, recorded, and will be uploaded to the Vale of Glamorgan Council's website for future viewing. Slight changes to the agenda before us today. I do have an urgent item, an agenda item 14, which I will actually, as it's a reference from a committee, I will bring it forward into that section of the agenda, but I'll bring that up. I also have a part 2 item, which follows on from an earlier report on today's agenda, and part 2 items are matters that are considered to be confidential, and therefore the meeting at that point will need to move into private session where confidential matters can be discussed. So at that point, I will ask Cabinet to agree to move into part 2. But without further ado, I shall get to the right bit of my computer screen, and we should be ready to go. So agenda item 1 on today's agenda is apologies for absence, and I can see everybody's smiling faces on the screen, so I'm taking it that we don't have any and that we're all here for the duration from what I can see. Agenda item 2 is minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of May 2023. And as I can't remember the last time I wasn't at a cabinet meeting, but as I wasn't at that cabinet meeting, I will need somebody to move and second those as a true record.
I'd like to move the minutes.
Thank you, Rhiannon.
And I'll second those.
Super. Thank you, Bronwyn. And then moving on, agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest, and if there are any, the nature of that interest, what it relates to. Do we have any today? No. Super. Moving swiftly on again, we now have 2 reports of meetings. The first one is the corporate parenting panel of the 13th of March, and as we have the chair of that panel in cabinet, over to you, Eddie, for that report.
Thank you, Leader. It's interesting, this report, and it shows it's regarding the parenting responsibility that we as a council have, and you can see in the report that we're now looking after 324 children or so at various stages. It's interesting that the needs are quite varied, but what we can see from the numbers, there's no particular. There has been an increase since COVID, but from this recent one, there aren't any dramatic ones. But what continues to be seen is the complexity of the needs of the children that are coming in. Thankfully, we're in a position where we're able to deal with them, and there's what we are doing as a strategy, as you're aware, is that we try and keep the children with the families, and we're supporting the families where we can, and if that's the parents are breaking down, then we end up with kinship care and things like that, and we've got a few families where we've got part responsibility sharing with the families as well. Interestingly, the panel discussed a particular issue on, and you can see from the notes that we're talking about the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We've had an influx of some of those, and there was a quite considerable discussion about their needs and the support. And it was interesting to hear from the officers that yes, they've come with additional needs, haven't they? And also there has been a challenge, and certainly the authority has taken that on board and learned quite a bit in the last 6 months to 12 months or so. What we've also done is linked up with Cardiff with their expertise, because clearly they have a much wider a higher number of unaccompanied coming in, and so we were able to utilise their expertise and knowledge on that. From the minutes, you can see that we are able to meet the demand. We have the capacity. that was asked about, and it is under constant review. Interestingly enough, we are supporting them, and we continue to do what we can for them. So that we're in a good place with that. The second item on the panel was about the transgender toolkit. This was brought to panel as a suggestion from the scrutinies that as corporate parents we should be aware of it as well. And yes, it had another discussion on the value of it and the need for it. And thankfully, it was understood that certainly we've done the right thing. We've put out guidance, and this has moved forward with it. And interestingly, some of the councillors who were involved in previous discussions accounted for a change in their views on what they initially thought about this toolkit for the better. So I was quite pleased with that. Clearly, it's part of the Welsh Government. We talked about the linking with where we've got our toolkit from, but the panel were pleased with the information brought through, and also a better understanding of the concerns and the life experiences of those that are involved, either transition or otherwise. But what we understood was that it's needed, and it was supported by those, particularly in the schools, that received this particular toolkit. So that's basically an overview of the report. So there's no recommendations as such, but it's certainly for awareness for the Cabinet. Thank you.
Great. So do I take it that you're moving that we note?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I knew there was something I had to say, but thank you, Leader. See, you don't forget.
The weather's too hot. So the weather's too hot. That's my excuse. Rhiannon, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Well, I'm very pleased to hear that the transgender toolkit was received with sensible acclamation. I mean, it's been a long road on this, and I'm pleased to hear that some people have actually gone as far as changing their views, because I know that it was with some trepidation that this was launched earlier this year, and it's really pleasing to see that this is something that is necessary. I know that some people, some critics particularly, have felt that it's something that we kind of pulled out of a clear blue sky, but it was actually material that teachers and foster carers and people standing in loco parentis needed. They needed to have something to refer to, because these are situations fraught with complications and difficulty. Every single case is different. There is no universal way of approaching this except with care, compassion and sympathy. So I'm really pleased to hear that it's received, that it had such a good reception.
Super. So would you want to second?
Yes, happy to second.
Yeah. Excellent. So moving on to agenda item 5. This is another report of a meeting, and this is just Cardiff Capital Region Cabinet, and fairly succinct minutes, but it can be referred back to the original published agenda in terms of the items that were discussed. Actually, one that I found particularly interesting is paragraph 7 on this, which is the gateway review process and the local evaluation framework, and that is about how we can evaluate what we're achieving and how we go forward, and that we've got two well-known academics, and that is Professor Piers Thompson of Nottingham Trent University, who actually used to be in University of South Wales, so he knows the area very well, and Professor Rob Huggins of Cardiff University, again a hugely experienced professor in economic development. So they're going to be undertaking the baseline work in support of the process, and that was a very popular appointment by the Cabinet. So as I said, they are what they are, and as I said, they relate back to the original agenda. So on that note, I think that we can just note that report.
And I'll second that, just for the record.
Thank you. So agenda item 6, we have there's the next agenda item 6 and 7, we have 2 references. The first one is a reference from the Governance and Audit Committee of the 25th of April 2023, and they were looking at the Audit Wales Springing Forward report and relating to asset management and workforce planning. So the reference to them was from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. So there's been quite a lot of discussion on this report. The Springing Forward report actually focused on the effectiveness of the council's arrangement in strategically managing its assets and workforce. And I think if you look at Appendix C, I think it's fair to say that overall the review findings were positive. And there were 3 recommendations made to the council. 1 was on assets and 2 were on workforce planning, which is again were in relation to our sort of planning, but also our monitoring of what we do. Again, very straightforward and something that we would seek to adopt. So having had the references from both committees, the recommendations that the Governance and Audit Committee accepted were that, firstly, that the findings arising from the review of the council's asset management, which was Appendix A to the report, and workforce planning arrangements, which is Appendix B to the report, and the response to the review findings and Audit Wales recommendations, which is Appendix C to the report, be endorsed. And you know, I think we would note that, but also that the report be referred to Cabinet for their oversight and endorsement of the proposed council action, which is Appendix C to report, to address the recommendations. And I'm happy to move that we endorse the proposed council actions. So on that note, I would move we note the first recommendation and that we endorse the proposed council actions.
And I'd like to second both of those, Leader.
Super. Find the next one. Agenda item 7 is Q3 progress against external regulatory recommendations, and we seem to have quite an agenda today where we're looking at how we measure things and how we go forward, because quite sometimes we have reports about how we're planning what we're going to achieve, but I think one of the important things alongside that is therefore how we monitor those plans in terms of going forward. But we also have regulatory bodies. So these are independent organisations who are looking at what we're doing and making sure that what we say we plan to do, we are actually delivering. And so this report is looking at the progress against the recommendations that those external bodies have made to us. And the actions have been incorporated within the council's strategic insight board, insight tracker. So that's sort of an internal committee which looks at those. And at Q3, it's actually quite positive in that overall there were 46 ongoing actions in the insight tracker, and 35 are viewed as being green status, so either on track or delivered. 4 are an amber status, so you know that's sort of going along, and only 7 out of the 46 on a red status, which is, you know, not actually progressing as we would wish. And of the 24 actions relating to local regulatory recommendations, 17 of those were green, 4 amber and 3 red. So that was viewed as positive, and the Governance and Audit Committee, they resolved that they would note the council's progress and the improvement proposals made by the council's external regulators, informed by the views and recommendations of scrutiny committees, But they also, and this is for us, they recommended that the removal of completed actions from the Strategic Insight Board Insight Tracker be endorsed, and for this matter to be referred to Cabinet for approval. And I think, yes, once we've achieved an item and it's completed, then it simplifies the monitoring process going forward if those are removed. So on that note, I would note the discussions of the committee, and I would endorse that that completed actions from the Strategic Insight Board Insight Tracker be removed, and I'd move.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you. Now I have to, this is where I said that I was going to move an urgent item up to this point. It would have been at agenda item 14.1, but it makes more sense to bring it forward here, and that's a reference from Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee, 17th of May 2023. And as Cabinet will remember, we on the 27th of April, we discussed the Vale Glamorgan Rapid Rehousing Plan, and that was referred to that scrutiny for discussion. I think it's fair to say it was a very comprehensive discussion of that report, and quite an insightful discussion as well. And committee accepted the reasons why such a plan was needed, accepted the plan that the homelessness crisis was going to be dealt with by a whole range of actions. So things like new social housing developments, encouraging private landlords to increase their portfolios, having increased or more temporary accommodation, the prevention work we do, homeless leasing, shared a pilot of shared accommodation to actually look at potential changes to Homes for You policy, our housing policy, and also changes to properties with an age designation, reducing the minimum age from 55 to 30, and also looking at properties currently subject to local letting properties. And so there were a whole range of topics that were brought up. There was discussion of hidden homeless, and I think that was a major issue for us right back at the start of the pandemic, when suddenly people that we didn't have registered as homeless were, because they were sofa surfing and they were sort of staying with friends and things, and they couldn't do that during the pandemic, plus the changes to the sort of statutory housing regulations. So there were those. There was discussion about the use of hotel and bed and breakfast accommodation, and I think it's fair to say, I mean, I can see Councillor Brooks here, but I mean, well back, I think it was either 2012, 2013, was when, under you as Cabinet member, we actually stopped using bed and breakfast and hotels, because we recognise that's not a good solution to anybody. And there was also discussion over whether or not people were able to self-cater. Now, we know that that's not possible within rooms, although people can now have fridges, but there are potential fire risks, etc. But we are working through solutions with hotels and things. More discussion about the changes to the age designations of properties, but I think in line with mention of the older person's housing strategy, where we are talking about not just having certain properties that are designated, but actually us having properties that are specifically suited to older people. And so that would be looked at on a case-by-case basis, whether or not those designations were removed. So that there was discussion of the concept of the temporary accommodation and what is happening with the Eagleswell Road development. And there was also discussion of mixed communities and intergenerational housing and that sort of thing. So very, very full discussion. What scrutiny decided at that point, or recommended at that point, is that that the rapid rehousing plan for Vale of Glamorgan be approved. So thank you. That the report be, sorry, that was Cabinet. I'm looking at the wrong one on this. Having only received it recently. That yes, they recommend the following comments be reported back to Cabinet as part of their consideration of the report prior to the final submission of the rapid rehousing plan to Welsh Government. And I think we note their comments. The report and plan should provide a more explicit reassurance that any decision to remove or revise the age designation on selected council-owned accommodation and housing would be made on a case-by-case basis, as well as taking into account the needs of existing residents. That, my understanding is, and I was present, that was stated at that scrutiny committee, and I'm happy to state that again, that there would be consideration on a case-by-case basis, and that existing residents would be part of that discussion. And it says that the report and plan should provide a greater recognition that if consideration was given to suspending the Homes for You policy, that this should take into account the needs of those who are currently on the waiting list. And again, I think it's fair to say that housing allocations are prioritised in terms of need. And that is exactly what the rapid rehousing plan would continue to seek to do. It may be that need goes to a higher level, but it will always take into account the housing need that is there. So I don't think that there's anything on there that we would not agree with and cover. So on that note, I would move that we note the recommendations from the committee.
I'll second that.
That one, thank you. I was juggling computer screens again. So moving on to agenda item 8, these are my 2 reports. And the first one is appointments to outside bodies and joint committees. And as Cabinet would be aware, we make appointments to a whole range of different bodies, whether that is part of our regulation of them or input into their regulation, or whether it's so that we can hear discussions that are ongoing amongst their members. But it's something that normally happens at the beginning of the administration, but sometimes has to be tweaked. And I think that's the case here. We've just got a couple of changes to what was agreed last year. So the recommendations today are that the amended record of members as attached to Appendix A be appointed or nominated to serve on the bodies listed until the local government elections in 2027. So that's in case might have to make changes to some in the interim. And 2, that where legally possible, attendance at meetings of organisations to which a member has been nominated or appointed by the council be classed as an approved duty for which travelling and subsistence allowances are payable in accordance with the council scheme. And I think, you know, for anyone that's interested, things like, you know, we have appointments to, I think we've got National Library of Wales, but we've got a whole range of things which might include people having to travel outside the Vale. So I think we need to have that recommendation in there so people aren't out of pocket by doing their additional duties. So on that note, I would move those 2 recommendations.
And I'll second those, Leader.
Thank you. And then agenda item 9 is the Vale of Glamorgan Council annual performance calendar. And I think, as I referred to earlier, sometimes we seem to have a lot of reports looking at how we're, our plans and strategies and that sort of thing. But then we also then have a whole number of reports which are to do with how we monitor our performance and going forward, and how we can reassure residents of the Vale that we are delivering what we originally set out to do. So this report outlines the key plans and reports that will be subject to consideration by members throughout the year. And it also sets out how we would propose to engage with elected members. So what part elected members will play in that. Appendix A outlines a rolling programme of collaborative work. So that's throughout the annual performance calendar. And Cabinet are asked to consider and endorse that calendar. And then Cabinet's also asked to consider the review findings from last year's annual self-assessment approach and approve the proposed changes for the 2022-23 self-assessment, including the indicative timetable. And I think that that's actually quite a robust process that we did for the first time last year, and we'll go through again shortly, where there are Cabinet members, directors, chairs of scrutiny, etc., are all sitting in a room to review performance. And Cabinet are asked to consider and approve the proposed timings of the panel performance assessment, which was informed by the views of scrutiny committees. So within the report, within the things areas for consideration, there are things like, we undertake directorate self-assessment, peer challenge, self-reflection. There's an annual self-assessment report. And I said the indicative timetable is at, I always have to find the right appendix A, which sets it out exactly what reports are coming where and to which committees, which individuals, and who's going to have oversight of that. So that's in effect our calendar going forward. And there are 4 recommendations on this, and that is basically that Cabinet considers and approves the Vale of Glamorgan annual performance calendar 2023-24 and the proposed approach to engaging with members in year to shape and refine the annual performance calendar of activities and to support members in their scrutiny role. That Cabinet considers the review findings from last year's self-assessment approach and approves the proposed changes to the 2022-23 self-assessment, including the indicative timetable. 3, that Cabinet considers and approves the proposed timing of the panel performance assessment. And finally, number 4, that Cabinet refers the report to all scrutinies and the Governance and Audit Committee for their consideration, with any reviews being referred back to Cabinet. So we've got this today. We will send it all out to all scrutinies and Governance and Audit, and then I look forward to hearing their reviews back. So on that note, I would move.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Then agenda item 10, I think probably for me the most exciting report today, something that's really looked forward to coming to Cabinet, but I won't go on anymore, so I'll hand over to the Cabinet, or the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places. It's perfect for you, Bron. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I mean, this report is about the outcomes of the 3 phases of public engagement and consultation on the sort of development and any future development of the Esplanade there at Penarth, and also then about some recommendations about the next stages of activity around that. Just as a quick recap, we've spent, or more than £500,000 has been invested in Penarth Pier Pavilion and the Esplanade in the last 2 years. And that includes things like the refurbishment of the pavilion, the street furniture, which I know has been repainted, some resurfacing works, the refurbishment of the Cliff Hill shelter, and also some of the existing buildings to create new catering outlets at the entrance to Windsor Gardens and the Clifftop play area as well. There was a report that went to Cabinet then in June 2022. And at that point, Cabinet agreed an extension then to the number of temporary highway trading licences on a month-by-month basis. And that was all pending the undertaking of public engagement and consultation on possible external trading arrangements and those associated works. And I think all this is in recognition is that Penarth, you know, we do see this as part of our high quality, and it's about visitor attraction, and also taking into account obviously residents in that area as well. So following that then, there was a programme of engagement and discussions then that began in August 2022, and they did a series of online polls, and also then for people to share their thoughts using ideas board then at the pavilion. And that work then went on throughout into September. And then there was a more formal survey exercise ran throughout October. So then moving then forward into November last year, a third phase of engagement began, and there were 2 public drop-in events, as well as a series of focus groups for residents, businesses and community groups. And at that stage, those sessions they had 7 themes basically, which emerged from the previous 2 stages. So, which obviously were the beach, retail, catering, seating, parking, transport, active travel, the street scene, and also events. So as you can see there's been a huge amount of work already undertaken, and great care actually taken, I think, in about making an informed and sustainable future then really for the Penarth Esplanade. After following all that programme then of public engagement and consultation, we've collated all the results together, had some discussions around that, and I think what came through then were a number of key issues in connection to each of the selected themes. So with that, we've actually taken forward now the 5 condensed themes, which will go into the next stage of activity. The first one is around public facilities, and there was a lot of talk then about the appreciation of the current appearance of the Esplanade, but then also came into that conversation then was about the Italian garden. That came up time and time again about the need for maintenance and improved lighting. So that's going to be one of the themes taken forward there. And also then about making the Esplanade what we call a place of destination. And that then is making it more attractive, and standardized sort of street furniture, really making it as you have arrived at your destination and this is a lovely place to be for everybody. So there is going to be an audit of the future usage of the Italian gardens, and then also I said about that cohesive brand and identity for the Esplanade there as well. So the second one then was around food and retail. And actually, we had quite a generally positive feedback around that, and lots of people remarked on the increased vibrancy of the area and the support then for the continuation of that provision. Obviously, there were a few concerns around that, and some people suggest they'd like to see more street food concessions along the front and maybe within the Italian gardens as well. So again, there's going to be some more work done and some more consultation around about appearance and design and quality, the potential for additional temporary licensed seating areas along the Esplanade, which would be balanced then against the need obviously to ensure sufficient car parking. Parking and transport, obviously again this is a very popular and very sort of a big issue for all of us, because obviously with the removal of some of those parking spaces, which are actually less contentious than we thought it would be. And I think we were expecting, you know, a lot more concerns raised around that. And respondents there, they were looking at the design of a shuttle transport between the town centre and the Clifftop car park, and maybe around more signage from Penarth train station and within the town centre, which would actually signpost you to the walking routes along to the Esplanade as well. So I say there's a lot more detail within the report. I'm just trying to pick out some of the highlights there as well. Events were another a big topic for us, and most people gave actually very favourable feedback in relation to the Summer Events Festival, which is actually run by Penarth Town Council. And there actually a lot of support then for actually that events programme at the Pavilion also expanding. So there'll be more work done in around that, and again it'll be part of this wider time frame as part of Penarth as a placemaking town. And again there'll be a substantial amount of work then working then with the town council closely on that. The beach and what we call the natural environment, a lot of this came up as well, and obviously talking about the importance about the Kimmin and the Kimmin grounds there as well. So there'll be further work done around the Kimmin grounds and about the current community users there, and about how we can link the Kimmin site then into the Esplanade as well. And again, part of that will actually be potential future uses of the Kimmin property as well. We did have some local members then from Augustine and Plymouth wards were consulted, and we've just received those or some responses back from those members. Interestingly, there were some varying and differing views, which obviously will be considered as part of the next stages, and they make for some interesting reading if you'd like to look through those. So they will be considered. And actually, if you want to read through them, which they do make very interesting reading, they will be added to the website as supplemental papers after this meeting. So it might be good to go and actually listen to some of the local views and their thoughts. And as I said, about the different views as well. So as part of that there, I've actually got 5 recommendations. So the first recommendation is that Cabinet considers the feedback received during the 3 phases of public consultation. Secondly, that Cabinet endorses a programme of priority activity, and that's set out in section 2 of this report, and that relates to the feedback received during the 3 phases of consultation, and also approves the production of a longer-term strategic study, including the production of a placemaking strategy for the Esplanade, intended as the preliminary part of developing a placemaking plan for the whole town of Penarth. And actually we'll talk a bit more about placemaking plans actually in my next report. 4, that delegated authority be granted to the Director of Environment and Housing Services in consultation with the Director of Place, the Chief Executive, the Leader, and myself as Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places, and that'll be to consider requests for any additional temporary licences for street trading at the Esplanade, pending progress on an appropriate longer-term engineering solution for the Esplanade. So as I said, at the moment there are temporary licences that will be going forward. And then number 5, the last one then, that in pursuance of recommendations 3 and 4, delegated authority be granted to the Director of Environment and Housing Services in consultation with the Director of Place, the Chief Executive, and myself as Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places. And this will be to produce a series of design principles that will guide the temporary use of the Esplanade for street trading, pending the implementation of a longer-term solution. And I'd like to move those 5 recommendations.
Thank you, Bron. Do you know, this is such a good piece of work, and I think it poses a difficulty, but it also is a real bonus that actually the Vale is made up of such diverse and special places. And I suppose I have to declare an interest as a Penarth resident, but Penarth is one of those. And I think that, back to last April, when there was lots of discussions on this, I can remember putting out a statement saying that we would listen to the people, and we would discuss with the people what the future way forward. But it's not that simple, is it? Because there are as many views really as there are people. And I think we've seen that from the tabled responses, that we've got three responses with 3 views. However, through our creative communities team and our communications team, who had other jobs to do at the same time, I would say, they've gone through a process of actually listening to people, bringing out the themes of the views that they heard, reflecting those back to people, listening again. And I think they went through it 3 times in total, plus adding in an extra session in I think it was January this year, because some people didn't feel that they'd had an opportunity to speak. So they just continually listened. I would really like us to put on record our thanks to those teams for the amount of work they did on this. And I think that we are most of the way to a solution, but I think exactly the right approach in terms of we will continue with the short-term licenses, and as long as everything's going well, and that's fine, while we make sure that we tweak it so that it fits in with the whole feel of the town per se, so that the Esplanade and the pier have always been an iconic focus within the town, and that's the way that it should stay for us. So no, as I said, I can probably say I'm stupidly excited about this piece of work. I am. I think it's a super piece of work, and all credit to the officers. But on that note, see, I was too fast. I got in before everyone else. I'll bring in Ruba, who's actually one of the ward members.
Thank you, Liz. Actually, you stole my thunder slightly. I think the lots of credit must go to the officers in this, because they are incredibly busy, but as a process and format of consultation, this is a really a thorough piece of work. And the fact that not everyone has responded doesn't stop the fact that this has been a good piece of work. And I do hope the people of Penarth, and I will declare an interest because obviously I'm a ward member, have felt that they have been listened to and had some of that feedback reflected back to them from officers. So as a piece of work and as a form of consultation and community engagement, this is a really good piece of work and a good format, I think, in terms of the tiers that we've gone through. Secondly, I would say that it is an iconic place, the Esplanade, and the Kimmin, although this isn't about the Kimmin, and I do hope that the people of Penarth actually will believe now that we do hold it in high regard, and we do see it as as an important part of the Vale, and we will invest our time in making sure that we get this right. And lastly, as a bigger plan, the placemaking, for me, placemaking is super exciting, because this will be part of that whole holistic view of Penarth, not just Penarth. Obviously, it will be happening in Cowbridge, it's happening in Barry. So it's an important piece of work which will link into the whole of the placemaking project, if you like. So yes, very exciting. So thanks, Bronwyn.
And then we have Mark that wants to come in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa, and also as another Penarth resident as well. Again, we're very delighted with this report, and also it shows the fact that we got the connectedness of Penarth with not just with the town centre, or the Esplanade, the town centre, but also the west of Vale Glamorgan, and in fact Wales and United Kingdom, because it's in a very attractive place, and clearly we got lots of objectives to fulfil. The first objective, obviously, is to make sure the community of Penarth feel as though that we can be proud of the Esplanade, and I think we very much are, and we see it as a key function. But also, we also feel very strongly that it's Penarth Esplanade, along with Penarth, is very much a destination as a town centre, and we're very proud of it. So, you know, we really recognise, you know, I'm delighted that, you know, the Vale Council is putting in lots and lots of money into the Esplanade, and will continue to do so. And I think that's very important that they realise that. And obviously, we want to make it more and more attractive for people to not just to visit, but also probably to live here as well. So can I commend you all for this? And I know the officers have worked really hard over the last year doing a fabulous consultation on that, and that will continue while we go through this process. So thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And then we have Eddie. I don't know if you're allowed, Eddie. You're not Penarth, but no, it's all right. Yes, Eddie, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it's what can I say? As I'm a non-Penarth, you know, Penarthian, whatever you call yourselves. I'm special, I know. It's a good piece of work, and yeah, certainly this has been coming through the cabinet for some time now, and fully support it. As a visitor to the Esplanade, every now and again, Mark's hit the nail on the head. It is a number one for the community, but it does draw in people from across the Vale and also across the border and from Cardiff. So it's yeah, I really support it, and yeah, I just wanted to add a bit of balance, that, you know, just show that we're all supporting it. All right, and you haven't got all the money, all right?
No, to be perfectly honest, we haven't. I mean, we spent the money. The money was spent on doing the hard landscaping and etc. On the Esplanade, but I think it's fair to say there is no money at the moment. So we know what we want to achieve. Now we have to go and look at where we're going to do. But I do think this is a super report, and I think it's built on, because there's been some superb work in terms of this sort of placemaking approach that's been done in Barry, when there was all the Barry story and all that sort of thing. But I said the actual approach to consultation has been superb as well. So thank you, Bronwyn, for pulling that together, and I'm delighted to second the report. Are we all happy with that? Thank you. And then all the background to all this sort of work. Back to you, Bronwyn. Agenda item 11, becoming a Placemaking Wales Charter signatory and developing placemaking plans. I'll leave it to you to explain.
Okay, thank you, Liz. I'm absolutely delighted to bring this report because I think by the council sign up to Placemaking Wales, or the Placemaking Wales Charter, it allows then us to apply then for Welsh Government funding to develop placemaking plans for each of our 4 towns in the Vale of Glamorgan. And I think to emphasise, because you think, what is a placemaking plan? And I think they are so important, because we've got 4 different towns, or large towns, within the Vale of Glamorgan. Obviously, we've got Penarth, which we've just been discussing. We've got Barry as the largest town, and then Llantwit Major and Cowbridge, all unique in their own identity, all with, I think, with a common golden thread. They're all part of the Vale of Glamorgan. They're all destinations, but each with all their own individual identities, which I think is absolutely fantastic, because who would want all towns to be exactly the same? I think everyone is special in their own way, and I think us as a council recognising that, and actually, you know, fulfilling the best potentials for each town, and to be proud of our towns, I think is really, really important. There are 6 principles to a placemaking chart. It might just be worth just running through those briefly for people who don't quite know what a placemaking plan is, because it's a few words, but actually there's a lot of meaning and a lot of depth to that. And I think the whole basis of this is about making a sustainable community. I think that is at the heart, and there's your golden thread, I think, for the 4 towns. So the first principle then is around people and community. And it's about involved in making sure that the local community are around the development of proposals in that. And it's about considering the needs, the aspirations, the health and the well-being of all the people in that area. And then about the location, it's about use land efficiently, and it supports existing places well connected, and also about where you're going to put new housing, employment, leisure, all that, which then moves into about reducing the need to travel, which is what we call movement, and that's walking, cycling, public transport. And to me, active travel is not just walking, cycling and travel. It could be by any which way you mean. It could be mobility scooter. It could be roller skates. It could be skateboard. However you move, and it's about trying to make sure that people can access these areas and to use it to the best that they can. So I really think it encompasses everybody within that community. And it's about the mix of uses as well. And it's about those opportunities, as I mentioned, about community development, local business growth, and then the access, what goes with that, then the access to jobs and services, and also the facilities. And I think that mix of use is really, really important as well. And obviously at the centre of that, I think you've got your public realm, which are your streets and your public spaces. And they're welcoming, they're safe and also inclusive, but with their distinct identity. As we just talked about the Esplanade, that is different to Barry Island, and the areas within Barry is different to Lantwit and then to Cowbridge. But it's about making sure that they are sustainable. And I think that is vital. And it's about the sustainable future of our communities, isn't it? And with that then becomes the identity of that town. You've got a lot of historic use, I think, in Lantwit. I think the historical value of Lantwit is huge. You've got the heritage in Cowbridge. Obviously, you've got places like the Cayman and Esplanade in Penarth. And for Barry, you've got our beautiful beaches and the seafronts and the areas then that come from there, and our beautiful country parks within Barry, and then on the outskirts as well. So I think all this feeds into this placemaking plan. And I think what else is interesting is not just councils, it's not just local authorities who work within this. There are organisations such as CADU, Transport for Wales, Natural Resources Wales, Pobl, who deal with housing a lot, Play Wales, Royal Society of Architects in Wales, Institute of Civil Engineers, the Federation of Masters Building, Chartered Institute of Highways and Transport. So you can really see there's just a flavour of all the people who have actually signed up to this. So it's not just local authorities, and I think that is really important. And that's where the sustainability for our communities come in then. It's about everybody working together. So I do have 4 recommendations. The first one is that the proposal that Vale of Glamorgan Council becomes a signatory to the Placemaking Wales Charter, and then this be referred for consideration by Environmental Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. And should that committee agree and have no further comments, the matter would be considered as agreed. Subject to recommendation 1, that Cabinet agrees the Vale of Glamorgan Council becomes a signatory to the Placemaking Wales Charter. Number 3, again, subject to recommendation 1, that Cabinet agrees the Vale of Glamorgan Council applies for Welsh Government funding to prepare placemaking plans for each of the 4 towns in the Vale of Glamorgan. And then the last recommendation, again, is subject to recommendation 1, that the Director of Place, in consultation with the Head of Finance Section 151 Officer and the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services, be authorising to enter into funding and the legal agreements with Welsh Government or any third parties to support the development of placemaking plans. And I so move those recommendations.
Thank you, Bron. I think that as Ruba succinctly said, that this is really exciting. It's to ensure that our communities have all the various components to go forward and be successful, but in an individual way that specifically suits them. So can see that Eddie's got his hand up now.
Yeah, I'll try and be more formal this time. So I do apologise if I made any comments out of order last time. But my excitement really about Penarth End. So I mean that's where that came from. This report sort of balances that. It's another. I think the report is really useful in that it outlines what a placemaking piece is and who's involved, and you know the facet. Bronwyn, you've explained that really well about the themes and the, you know, what it is aiming to do, and also that it isn't just something that's done to a community or a town or whatever. It involves consultation and all the other stakeholders, and it's interesting that we're in that. And I understand that we've got a presentation at Llantwit Town Council tonight regarding this particular subject, placemaking. And it's interesting that initially people go, what's placemaking and what does it mean for us? And it's good that we know that it's with a good placemaking plan, it lays out what you provide, those, you know, those aspects of the identity and, you know, the mix of use and what we're achieving. Then we put that on the table and then people can understand what we're about and where we're moving forward. So I thank you for this report and look forward to seeing how we as a council move forward with it. Thank you.
Super. Gwyn, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Leader, excellent report, Bronwyn. You really explained it exceptionally well, but I do look forward to this. I think we're very enthusiastic in Llantwit Major for the future of this report and where we go from here in the future. I know there's a group coming down tonight to do a presentation for the Town Council, and I'm sure that Llantwit Major needs a little bit of a lift at the moment, and I'm sure this will certainly play a big part in the future of the town. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gwyn. It's an interesting one because when we do talk about place, you know, it's one of those things that actually it's there because it's within all of us to do with where we come from. And I always remember just after the Manchester Arena bombing that there was a poet from Manchester actually gave a performance on This Is the Place, and it distilled the very nature of that city, and it was hugely powerful. And the Barry story did provided quite a backdrop to Barry, but it's also to do exactly as Bronwyn's focusing on, is the sustainability of that community. And, you know, do people have to travel an hour to get to a GP? Do they have to how do they access local services? Are there opportunities to meet people in a social setting? All those sorts of things come into it. So really keen to see this work go forward and to see us sign up to the charter. Eddie, you want a second bite?
Yeah, only just in case I'd missed it. Second Bronwyn's move and vote.
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so Eddie, Bronwyn's moving, Eddie's seconding. Is everybody in agreement? Yeah. Super. And then next stage on with another brand new school. So it's over to Rhiannon, agenda item 12, to look at the expansion of Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg. Here we are, Rilla.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm updating you on the consultation exercise that we undertook on the proposal to increase capacity for Welsh medium education by expanding Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg from 210 places to 420 places. That will be September 2025. So what I'm trying to do is advise you of the outcome. During the consultation period, there were 91 responses, and they were asked whether they supported, did not support or have no opinion on the proposals. 86 indicated they supported it, and 5 responded indicated they were not. There were a variety of reasons brought up for their responses, all of which I felt were dealt with very efficiently in the report. For example, the need to prioritise Welsh language education, English language education, which of course runs counter to what the Welsh Government is attempting to do in order to increase the number of Welsh speakers within Wales. Worries about the size of the school. And I think that's interesting, isn't it, when people worry that when you have a larger school, the community is lost. But I think that that's down to the staff and the children and the leadership to ensure that a community is retained within a school, whatever its size. I've experienced of both small and large schools, and it's about the attitudes of the staff and the children concerned that creates a community. Discussions about travel, all of that I think has been dealt with. And there was also the concern about whether it would impact on the Mudiad Maithrin locally, but I think that's been dealt with. They're working with Mudiad Maithrin in order to ensure that Welsh medium nurseries outside of the Vale's provision are going to be able to work with the school. So what I'd like us to do then, please, is think about our recommendations. Sorry, I'm doing 2 screens here. So there's a report, the consultation document, which is Appendix A, consultation response report, which is Appendix B, and the community and equality impact assessment, which I know we've talked a lot about lately, which in order to increase the capacity for Welsh medium education in the Western Vale by expanding Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg from 210 places to 420 from September 2025. So that Cabinet approves the proposal to increase the capacity for Welsh medium education by expanding Ysgol Iolo Morgannwg through the publication of the proposals and the statutory notice, and that we note that the major investment towards a new school building set out in the proposal is subject to the necessary funding being approved by the Welsh Government. So are we happy to accept those recommendations?
I'm happy to second, and there are lots of thumbs up on the screen, so we're happy to agree as well. That's really good. And actually, it's worth mentioning that there's a brand new English medium school opening in, I think it's September, isn't it? Is that another 0 carbon for the Vale?
Almost 0 carbon, isn't it?
I have to go and check, because I know we've got 1 low carbon and 2 0 carbons coming, but which is which, I'll have to check. But no, excellent news and excellent news for Iolo. But obviously we've got to go through the statutory notice. But if there's that much support for it in the initial stages, then I shall look forward to that. It's excellent. And then on to agenda item 13. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a part 1 report on the formation of a housing partnership programme with Cardiff Council. There will be a subsequent part 2 report, confidential report. So the anything that is commercially confidential will be covered in the part 2 report. So if we just take a look at agenda item 13. And in effect, this part 1 report discusses the background and reasoning to us establishing a housing partnership programme with Cardiff, and looks at the sort of the main considerations around local authority housing development, etc. There is a business case for the housing partnership programme as well. And I think, I mean, we were just discussing the reference from Homes and Safe Communities about the rapid housing programme and some of the challenges, the huge challenges we're facing in terms of housing. We've looked at our strategic housing plan in past scrutinies about the pressures that we're facing to ensure that people in the Vale have stable homes for the future, and that when it was looked at with all the fragility of the market, etc., it was felt that the best way to achieve this was to go into a partnership, a delivery partnership with Cardiff Council, and we've got currently a forward a development programme which identifies confirmed and potential sites, and that's looking at about 486, and that's apart from ones that things like housing associations, etc., are delivering. But actually, I'd like to do more, and if we can find land, I would like to build more. And the reason that I would like to build more is that then we can ensure the quality. We can also ensure the infrastructure is built alongside developments. I think we've all seen developments where the promised infrastructure is either delayed or never gets built. And I think by the council delivering their own developments, then we can ensure that. So the other sorts of benefits that there are is that if we're working with Cardiff, then actually it becomes a more attractive venture for contractors to tender for, and there is difficulty in getting those. An increase in social value is more opportunity to develop training and employment opportunities and what we can deliver to our communities going forward. There's knowledge sharing. We can share resources. We can increase the supply of affordable housing across the region, and there's economies of scale, because there's potential for cross subsidies if we build houses for sale as well as houses for rent. That can work together as well. So some really solid background aims and objectives in with this proposal. One area that I actually did specifically ask questions about is that the report talks about a single design guide and development specification. And my own fear is, I said, well, does that mean that we're going to build sort of identical boxes across Cardiff and the Vale? And I was emphatically told no, that the design guide is in terms of what goes into houses. It is in terms of, are they going to be low or zero carbon, i.e. inexpensive to heat and run? Are they going to be easily adaptable? The houses we're currently building, sounds silly, but they have a PowerPoint at the bottom of the stairs, so that if needs be, a stair lift can be put in quite easily. They have a downstairs wet room, again, to make them accessible to people. And there are, and I can't remember what they were, but there are things within the kitchen, etc. All houses get a washing line and a shed. Simple things like that. And that's what the design guide and development specification would include. If we go back to Bronwyn's report on placemaking, the actual appearance of the houses and the style, I suppose, would come down to local planning decisions and what is right for that area, and I would fully support that. So we will have further discussion within part 2, but I think for now the recommendations for the part 1 report is that Cabinet notes the proposals to establish a housing partnership programme with Cardiff Council and to jointly appoint a development partner to deliver the Council's ambitious housing development programme. And secondly, that Cabinet notes the requirement to take formal decisions on the progression of the above proposal as part of the wider considerations detailed in the part 2 report later in the agenda, which is actually next. So I would so move.
And I'm really happy to support those and to second those recommendations.
Thanks, Bronwyn. And everybody else seemed to be putting thumbs up and stuff, so we're happy with that. That's super. So as I mentioned, we now have one remaining item which is considered to be confidential, and so we'll need to move into a private session. So therefore I'll ask for Cabinet to agree to move part 2, and